Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Tim O'Flaherty. I represent Manchester's Ward 5. So I have a short statement to read, making some bold assertions, so forgive me for painting such broad strokes, but in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this short. So I'm urging you to support House Bill 337, legalizing marijuana. Marijuana prohibition is the cornerstone of the war on drugs. By supporting this bill, we can take a major first step towards ending this war in New Hampshire. The state of New Hampshire, in its founding document, claims to be instituted to ensure the protection of all members of society. Today, over 200 years later, we have come to accept as normal a situation where the state is at war with its own citizens. The war on drugs is, in fact, a war. It's not on inanimate objects or substances, but on people. A war on our neighbors, our friends, our family, our fellow citizens. And to characterize drug policy as a war is not mere hyperbole. When in 1971, US President Nixon first used that phrase, federal funding was largely directed toward education and rehabilitation. Since his administration, after Nixon with Reagan, he turned rhetoric into reality largely for political advantage. The war on drugs since then has rapidly obtained the form we're familiar with today, with militarized police, exploding prison populations, and massive violence perpetrated against us and our communities, all in the name of protecting us. Looking at the past 40 years with massive sums of money spent on enforcement and little, if any, impact on reducing drug consumption and abuse, we could easily conclude that the war on drugs was a tremendous failure or even a disaster. The truth is, however, that it has been a great success. To understand that, we must understand that the war on drugs has never really been about drugs. If we look back on the entire history of the prohibition of drugs, we would see that it was born in racism. The first laws in the US were created to be enforced against Chinese immigrants in the West for use of opium. Then laws prohibiting cocaine in the South were used to help marginalized blacks. Next, cannabis, with a long history and widespread use, was demonized as it came to be known as marijuana and was associated with Mexicans in order to persecute them. We live with the racist legacy of drug prohibition today, although we are now more equally ensnared in its chain of destruction. The war on drugs is a system of social control in which criminal penalties have been used to marginalize and disenfranchise the poor and minorities in order to create a permanent underclass. Police are kept busy. Jails have become centerpieces of local economies as they are built to fill to capacity. The legal system justifies its existence as it tries to cope with the problem it itself created. In this regard, the objective of the war on drugs has been very successful. Though the war on drugs has largely been promulgated by the United States, New Hampshire has been a willing participant in the ugly and destructive policies of drug prohibition, and it has a responsibility to protect the rights of its citizens. All men have a natural right to the life, liberty, and property according to Article 2 of the Constitution. Right? Under Article 2 of the Constitution, some of these rights are surrendered per Article 3 in order to receive protection, and without such, the surrender is void. What form of protection can be claimed when the state is promulgating a war against its own citizens? The war, which claims the right of self-ownership, is expendable in order to enforce a policy of control and submission. If man has a right to himself, he has a right to consume whatever substance he deems appropriate. So long as he is not harming another, the state has no cause to intervene. The question of marijuana legalization is not merely an issue of measuring the practicalities of any benefits versus any potential harm. It is an issue of principle, an issue that calls into question the legitimacy of the state as an institution. The state of New Hampshire must declare a ceasefire in this war and take a stand protecting citizens who formed it against the US federal government, the first step toward this end is to legalize marijuana. Please support House Bill 337 so we can begin to reduce the harm of this war has inflicted and instead focus on caring for those that abuse drugs.
Thank you. Why should we care for the people that abuse drugs?
I think that drug abusers should be regarded with pity.
Why? They should do it to themselves.
They need treatment and our care, not to be treated as criminals and second-class citizens.
Do you believe they are now being treated that way in the state of New Hampshire?
I do. Even if the prison population for those convicted only for marijuana possession is minimal, I don't actually know the statistics, such a conviction can ruin someone's life. Drug courts and employment become extremely difficult. And I believe it's a tool that's added to other sentences to further incarcerate them, extend their sentences.
Thank you. Representative Valancourt.
I'd like to ask a question about the, thank you, Madam Chair, about the federal versus state dynamic. We heard that 18 states now have medical marijuana and 2 states now have recreational marijuana. Does there not come a tipping point, maybe you can talk about what that tipping point might be, when if enough states say, people want this, we're going to legalize it, that the feds are going to have to change their opinions?
Well, the feds so far have really been disregarding the rights of the states. They just don't seem to care that the majority of people in these states want legalization. And it is my hope if we in New Hampshire can legalize New Hampshire, it will add our voice to those other states and make the federal government pay attention and back off on this issue. They should be protecting the rights of their citizens, but they have not been. They've been persecuting them. They've been persecuting us, and as representatives in the state of New Hampshire, it's our duty to enforce our Constitution and protect the rights of our citizens, first and foremost.
Thank you. All set? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tom Reed, is he still here? Dan McGuire, is he here?